Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine you're having a chat with an AI, right? Just like messaging a friend.
Yeah, pretty common now.
You share some stuff. Maybe later you think, okay, I'll delete this conversation. You hit delete, assume it's just gone. Poof. Digital ether.
Uh-huh. Vanished.
Now, picture that conversation, the one you specifically deleted, actually showing up, like as evidence
Oh.
in a courtroom.
It sounds, well, almost unbelievable, doesn't it? But that's exactly what we're starting to see happen.
Right.
This idea that your chats with AI, they might be way more permanent and maybe less private than you thought. Even after deleting, it's not just theory anymore. It's becoming a concrete legal reality.
Exactly. This AI chat data, it's suddenly a really big deal in legal fights. Sometimes maybe an unwelcome one.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what this deep dive is all about. We're going to dig into the sources you shared, these articles, notes, and try to figure out what's really going on.
Yeah, what's driving it?
What specific events push this into the spotlight? And crucially, what does it all mean for you, the person actually using these AI tools day to day?
And what's really fascinating, I think, is seeing this collision course. You've got this massive, gold rush for data. It's the absolute fuel for AI.
Totally.
And it's running smack into established legal systems.
Yeah.
The rules are shifting, It's less about the tech labs now and more about lawyers arguing in court.
And your sources point to two really key examples, these two big lawsuits that are kind of defining this new territory. What's the first one we should look at?
Well, the first one that's really shaping things right now is OpenAI versus the New York Times.
Yeah.
So the core of it is the New York Times suing OpenAI, alleging massive copyright infringement based on the data used to train ChatGPT and other models.
But the angle on user data specifically, that seems really sharp here, according to the source. The Times suspects people might be using ChatGPT to kind of sneak around their paywall.
Exactly. Accessing Times articles without paying, and then maybe deleting the chat history to, hide the evidence. And that suspicion, it led straight to a really powerful court ruling. A U.S. judge ordered OpenAI to preserve all relevant ChatGPT logs for this case.
And this was the bit that really stood out reading the sources, what all L actually means here, because it seems to go way beyond what you'd normally expect.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking about preserving conversations that users genuinely thought they had deleted, gone forever.
Wow.
It also includes data from using that temporary chat feature. The name implies it wouldn't be saved, right?
Right? Temporary.
But nope. And it even mandates keeping logs linked to user accounts that were completely deleted.
Yeah.
Like you close your account entirely.
Seriously. Even deleted accounts.
Yeah. And it covers API usage too, unless there's a very specific zero data retention policy agreed in the contract beforehand.
Okay, so why? What was the judge's thinking there?
Well, the judge basically said the potential value of all this data as evidence for the court in this lawsuit, it outweighs the privacy interests of potentially hundreds of millions of users.
Hundreds of millions. That number just lands, doesn't it? Puts the scale into perspective. Okay, so that's OpenAI versus the Times, data preservation. What's the second big case the sources highlight?
The second key one is Reddit versus Anthropic.
Anthropic, they make the Claude AI model, right?
That's the one. So Reddit, the huge online forum platform, is suing Anthropic.
And what's Reddit's main complaint against Anthropic?
According to Reddit's lawsuit, as laid out in the sources, Anthropic allegedly scraped content from Reddit, like loads of it, potentially over 100,000 times, specifically to train their AI models.
Yeah.
And Reddit says, hey, that was against our rules, our terms of service.
And Reddit's view on their own content's value, your source mentions this. They're pretty clear on that, aren't they?
Oh, yeah. They really emphasize that these authentic human conversations on their site are incredibly valuable. They even point to that reported $60 million a year data deal they supposedly made with Google as kind of proof of value.
Right. Context.
And they're basically saying this valuable stuff shouldn't just be grabbed for free to train AI.
So these two cases, NYT versus OpenAI and Reddit versus Anthropic, they really shine a light on this tricky spot AI companies are in.
Definitely. You can see it really clearly in how OpenAI reacted to that court order to preserve data.
How so?
They're pushing back hard, arguing that the ruling forces them to basically ignore user privacy choices, the choices users made about deleting things. And they say that damages user trust. They're really leaning into the privacy argument publicly. And that's where the source uses that term, the spaghet, like doing the splits,
Right, right. Pulled in two directions.
Exactly. On one side, AI companies, OpenAI included, they talk a lot about user privacy, being good stewards of data.
Yeah, that's the public face.
But on the other side, Their whole business, the tech itself, completely depends on getting and using enormous amounts of data, often from users or scraped from the web. So there's this built-in conflict, isn't there, between the public stance and the business need.
And it's not just OpenAI feeling that tension. Your source mentioned Anthropic too, right? The company that often tries to be the sort of ethical AI choice.
Yeah, exactly. Anthropic often promotes itself as more responsible, more ethical, but then you have this Reddit lawsuit painting a picture where maybe those ethical lines get blurred when faced with the huge commercial need for training data.
It suggests those promises get tested.
They definitely seem to be getting tested.
Yep.
And this whole situation then spills over into a pretty big legal mess, especially for users in different parts of the world.
Ooh.
Well, that U.S. court order telling OpenAI to keep all that data, it runs right up against European law, specifically GDPR.
The right to be forgotten.
Precisely. GDPR gives users the right to have their data deleted. So OpenAI is stuck, really, caught between following a U.S. court order and respecting European privacy rights. It's a tough spot.
Okay, so let's get specific then. Based on your sources, who exactly is affected by this U.S. court order directed at OpenAI? Because it sounds like there's a difference.
There is, yeah. The sources make a clear distinction. Who is definitely affected are the folks using the standard consumer versions. That's ChatGPT Free, ChatGPT Plus, and ChatGPT Pro.
So most individual users.
Pretty much. For those users, this order means all their logs are being kept right now. Doesn't matter if you manually deleted chats, used temporary chat, or even deleted your whole account.
Wow, okay.
And like we said, API use is included too, unless you had a specific zero data retention deal already set up.
Right, so that's who is affected. Who is less affected or not affected by this specific order?
That would be users on the business or education side, so ChatGPT Enterprise and ChatGPT Edu users. For them, the existing contracts they have with OpenAI about data storage, deletion, usage, those agreements still stand. The court order, as the source describes it, seems mostly aimed at that broad base of individual consumers using the regular ChatGPT.
And at least for now, the source points out that even though OpenAI is fighting this court order,
Right, they are challenging it.
the practical situation seems to be that for most of us, the idea that deleted means gone forever just isn't quite true at the moment. That U.S. ruling is kind of setting the standard, temporarily anyway.
Yeah, that seems to be the reality on the ground. So pulling it all together, thinking about what this actually means, it's pretty clear this isn't just some abstract legal thing happening miles away.
No, absolutely not. This really changes how you, the person using these tools, maybe needs to think about privacy and, well, how permanent your chats with AI like ChatGPT or Claude actually are.
That's the real takeaway, isn't it? That aha moment, or maybe uh-oh moment, is realizing that your interactions, even stuff you tried hard to erase or thought was just temporary, it could potentially stick around. And maybe even become part of some legal process down the line. It's not just about your data being used anonymously to train the AI anymore. It could potentially be surfaced in a very specific, maybe public legal way.
It really shows how fast things are changing, doesn't it? Around data privacy, user control, especially with this new wave of generative AI. What you type into that chat window today,
Yeah.
under the right or maybe wrong legal circumstances, someone else could be reading it tomorrow, in a courtroom maybe, a place you never ever imagine.
So just to quickly recap the main points we've hit, we're seeing these key legal cases forcing AI companies to hold on to user data, and that includes chats people thought they'd deleted.
Right.
This is causing a big clash between U.S. legal demands for discovery and privacy rules like GDPR in Europe, and it's mostly hitting individual users of these AI tools the hardest right now.
Okay, so here's something to maybe chew on as you use these tools going forward. If what you say to an AI, even in what feels like a private chat that you later delete, could potentially wind up being reviewed in court, how does that actually change how you interact with these incredibly powerful tools? And maybe more fundamentally, who really gets the final say over your own digital history in this new era?